Good evening, and thank you for coming to tonight's program featuring radio's best guys, Harry Shearer and Andrei Codrescu. I am Andrea Grossman, founder of Writer's Block, a nonprofit author lecture series dedicated to bringing Harry Shearer to participate in as many Writer's Block programs as possible. Before we get to tonight's program, I'd like to thank Temple Emmanuel for inviting Writer's Block to use its beautiful facility, to Andre, who has come from New Orleans, and to Harry, who braved rush hour traffic from Santa Monica, whose trip here probably took longer than had he come from Louisiana. Since some of you might be new to Writer's Block programs, be sure to sign the mailing list in the lobby to hear about our upcoming literary programs in the next few months. We've got Elmore Leonard with Academy Award nominee Scott Frank, John le Carré in a rare Los Angeles appearance, David Peter Gooderson, Nick Hornby with Sandra Singh Lowe, Helen Fielding, author of Bridget Jones' Diary, Paul Auster, Annie Proulx, Gottfried Wagner, great-grandson of Richard Wagner, and others. Radio is an elusive pleasure. You listen, you concentrate, you imagine, you visualize. Andrei Codrescu has been talking to us on National Public Radio for about 10 years, taking us on his travels and giving us insights about our American landscape that would have passed us by without his observations. With his special perspective, we see things unique to America that suddenly become funny, sometimes poignant, but always with a new slant. And that's why we love his radio segments so much. His vision of America enriches and refreshes us all the time. If only we could hear it more often. At last count, he's the author of about 21 books, which include poetry, essays, and novels. I think he's got 2 more books coming out in the next several months. Andre is also the creator of the noted literary review, The Exquisite Corpse, which has become something to covet among literary enthusiasts. I note it because it is accessible and fun. His first novel, The Blood Countess, and his new one, Messiah, take as their playground the supernatural, the spiritual, the pious, and the pretenders. Messiah adds some millennium rapture to those fundamentals. But above all else, it is a great read, and it is easy to imagine him reading it to us as a long piece on NPR. I love his sentences. They're beautifully short and so richly descriptive. I must read from a blurb on the back cover of the book. He uses our language so elegantly, with such wit and verve, that it makes me think the secret to writing great English is to be born speaking Romanian. That critic is his friend Harry Shearer. A master social critic, Andre could only be matched by one other such interpreter of the things we do, Harry. Because Harry's done so much great stuff, every time I introduce him at Writer's Block programs, there's more to say. He's an actor, comedian, the best voice on the nightly True Life series called The Simpsons, satirist and host of KCRW's Le Show. But Harry is more than all of that combined. I think he's the most gracious guy in the world, even though tonight, Tom Brokaw might not be as enthusiastic as I am. The guy is amazing, and he's probably sick and tired of hearing me carry on about his unforgettable Saturday Night Live pieces, his writing, and Le Show. But Harry reminds us that the minute we get comfortable with the way we live, or those we elect, or the news stories we read, or the news guys we watch, it's time to startle ourselves over the mediocrity that we absorb and live with all the time. Harry's written a book, and it's called It's the Stupidity Stupid, or why some people hate Clinton and why the rest of us have to watch. It's the easiest book in the world to read. Because when you read it, you'll hear Harry's voice, his characteristic digressions, some great lines, and some amazing observations. I am especially fond of the index and the very useful charts scattered throughout the book. Here's the format. Harry and Andre will talk. They're good friends, so they have a lot to say. After they're done, you can ask questions. Please use the microphone here on the aisle and be brief. Book Soup is here with lots of Andre's and Harry's books. I strongly urge you to buy copies of both. They make great reading for millennium curmudgeons, Democrats, and Republicans. Harry and Andre will sign the books, which are valuable first editions. Buy lots now while they're cheap, and before you know it, they will become rare and inflated collector's items. And if you buy enough books, Harry might even break out into an encore performance of his hit medley, Songs in the Key of L. It is my great pleasure to introduce Harry Shearer and Andrei Codrescu.
Well, that says it about all.
That's it. Thank you. Good night.
So I've been reading the Upanishads.
Well, you're making more plane flights than I am.
No, I just heard that word for the first time in a very long time, said out loud. You know, I've always read it, but I never
Yes.
actually heard anybody say Upanishads.
I, for the longest time, had not heard somebody say, and I don't have the confidence to say it aloud here,
No.
but the word that ends with Gita, that
Right.
I don't know how the rest of that.
Bhagavad.
Bhagavad Gita.
Bhagavad, yeah.
But I'm not reading that.
Well, I read your book today, though. I'm sorry I didn't get to blurb it.
Oh, that's okay. It would have looked like unseemly mutual backscratching if we blurbed each other's books.
No, we don't do that. We do have the city of New Orleans in common, though, so...
Yes, we do. We are actual neighbors. You haven't bought your house yet, right?
Yeah, I did.
You did. So we're not neighbors anymore.
Well, no, I didn't buy a house. I bought an apartment.
Oh, you bought that?
Yeah.
We're...
I was just, actually, I spent Mardi Gras getting my kid out of lockup, sent to lockup in New Orleans, where he ended up with 45 of his best friends for creating mayhem, if you can believe that, on the Lundi Gras, making bonfires and dancing around. And
I thought that's what you're supposed to do.
well, the New Orleans police got tough this year.
I heard, yeah. Not as tough as the New York police, though.
Well, no, I mean, heard the New York police can read.
Well, they can read the manuals with the guns that they buy. Oh, it's amazing what that New York has now wrested from Los Angeles the title of worst police force, or from New Orleans too, because of its history. But
Yeah, well, you know, New York is terrible now. It's like Minneapolis of the East. Everything is so clean, but the cops are very mean. You know, they beat up some of Tristan's friends, and then he spent about 40 hours in lockup, and he came out radicalized. He looks like Leon Trotsky now.
really,
But I wish I'd gotten him out of jail myself, you know, but it was on Mardi Gras Day, the owner of Molly's on the Market saw me fiddling with my cell phone trying to get some on, and he said, "This is a day for frivolity. Let me make the call." So he did, and within 3 hours he was out. Of course, I had to buy about 16 VO5s and water from the guy who got him out.
if you've never been to New Orleans, take it from, well, at least me, if not him, that you must go there. I don't understand why they don't use "Antidote to America" as their tourism slogan, because that's what the place is. It's
Absolutely. The way I used it in the book is really as the last, the absolute residence of meat space. That's where meat space lives, and that's what the cybernauts call, you know, scenes like this,
Actual.
where the actual talk, you
Yeah.
know, meat space. And
meat with an A, with two A's.
Yeah, M-E-A-T, with two T's.
Who's counting?
But yeah, that's why New Orleans in the book is the place where finally the Messiah comes instead of here. Or to CNN in Atlanta. Or to Jerusalem, of course, where everybody keeps waiting.
Yeah.
So,
I would think that if he was going to come anywhere, he'd come to Talk Back Live. Not just CNN, but that show that they do in the middle of the shopping mall,
right.
where that audience, I don't know if you've seen it, this is the show that's on at noon every day on CNN, and Tom Shales of the Washington Post, not my favorite critic necessarily, but he does come up with some great lines every once in a while, and he said that the audience on Talk Back Live looks like they're in a hostage situation. Because they've been, I mean, all audiences basically in television are now in hostage situations, because people come up to them on the street, "You want to go to a TV show?" And before you know it, you're trapped for 8 hours watching.
They pay you?
No. But you're watching bad stand-up comics going, "So, that's scene 1. And in a couple hours, we'll get to scene 2. Meanwhile, who's from Ohio?" But the people on Talk Back Live, you've seen that show, right?
No.
Oh, God. They're in this atrium mall, the John Portman-esque atrium malls that became popular during the 80s. Every Hyatt hotel in the world has them. And It's just an audience full of people looking like this. When can we go? When can we go? And people, cameramen are, handheld cameramen are running around. People have phones. It's the most interactive talk show in the world.
They block the exit.
They have internet. They have faxes.
Oh, actually, I was on that show and they just started the first one, and they lost the feed. I was in Washington, and I remember they showed my face for a second, and then somebody said something. I said something, and no sounds came out. They're just trying it out because there was cell phones, there was
there's
internet.
Everything, yeah.
Right.
And it's a perfect example of how infatuation with technology leads to absolutely no content. The ultimate end of infatuation with technology is zero content. Because the show is, we've got something from the internet, and here's a moronic one-sentence statement, and then we've got something on the phone, and another moronic one-sentence statement. But they do have the internet and the phone.
Well, in my book, to return to a subject of perennial interest, one of my characters, Felicity, stumbles on a site called Make Love to People from History. And
a website.
A website.
Yeah.
And she goes in there quite innocently, wanting to fill a few empty hours at the end of the 20th century by making love to a few people like Joan of Arc and, Ovid Publicus. And they turn out actually to be quite real. And the only, she returns to it with her friend Andrea, the other character, and they both make love to people from history. So it's a good use of virtuality in there.
I'm amazed that somebody hasn't stolen that idea yet.
Somebody actually read the book and said they punched in to see
if it existed.
It existed, but it's not yet there. Yeah, it is a good idea. Especially since this wasn't just, one of those sites where you type. It was a virtual environment, so you could actually go in there and walk around the Black Sea and gather dust on your sandals and then run into Ovid half asleep after having spent the night at the wenches of Pontius, and you're there.
Yeah. Have you? What's the deepest you've gone into cyber stuff?
Well, in Seattle, when Linda Stone took me to a place called Cheers, it's like a sort of a bar. And everybody in there they choose their avatars either from a menu, or the more elaborate people create their own. But the avatars are things like, there was a Popeye sailor with big muscles, and what was that? Sort of, I don't remember what Linda's avatar was, but these people talk to each other in real time, and the words come out in a balloon over their heads. And if you want to have a private conversation, then the balloon is dotted. It's a dotted line. And one sort of sailor, Popeye guy, came up to her and said, "What are you doing on Friday night?" And she clicked on his profile, and it turned out he was a soldier stationed in Bosnia. And so she asked him privately, "What's Bosnia like?" And so he started conversing with her about Bosnia. Meanwhile, all this sort of out-loud flirtation is going on between various people who are just popping up all over the place. And then in the very far end, there were these McDonald arches type thing. I said, "What's there?" And she said, "That's the gateway to another world." So, but I felt very much that I was in there. I mean, I didn't feel like I was just me. Big thing was a tool to make this real me move.
I had the most virtual real I've been was at the Super Bowl, which, as I said to people on the radio, was interesting to visit, just because it's as deep and as non-commercial as Mardi Gras is. This is shallow and corporate, with capital letters.
Was this in New Orleans?
No, this was in Miami. Even worse. It's a festival of the grunts in corporate America. It's the second assistant sales managers for the local Budweiser distributors who get their one big payoff of the year. They get to go to the VIP suites on the third floor of the stadium that's hosting the Super Bowl, and there are these great spreads of what appears to be food laid out before them, you know, and they think they're being treated like potentates when in fact they're being treated like medium rollers in Vegas on a bad day. But what I was doing there was there's this technology which is sort of the other end of that virtual reality thing, which I think I've told everybody in waking distance of Los Angeles that I did this pilot for HBO based on what I do on the radio, and HBO bought it and then unbought it, and within a week. But it was there's this technology where Clinton and Ken Starr and Larry King and James Carville and Hillary are created in a computer.
Who are these people?
We'll talk about it later. I have to save some clippings for you. And I put on like a wetsuit. It looks like a wetsuit, except it has wires trailing from it, and this headpiece with cameras looking at these adhesive, shiny dots that are placed on my face, and I actually make the characters move and talk simultaneously in real time. So it's animation that's created in real time. So I was at the Super Bowl as Larry King on the Jumbotron hosting the Super Bowl. Wow. And I talked to somebody at CNN afterwards, and he said, yeah, I heard about that. You know, all I heard was, gee, Larry was really funny at the Super Bowl. If you see Larry at Nate and Al's, tell him it was thanks to me. But the experience of being somewhere else, Stevie Wonder was doing a dialogue with me, and he's on the field. Now,
where were you?
I was in the bowels of the stadium in this little tiny room. Now, Stevie wouldn't have known if I was sitting next to him anyway, but still, the task of putting him and me together in one space to look like we're in the same place was complicated by the fact that he didn't like his golf cart that was going to take him to where he was supposed to go. Don't ask me.
What didn't he like about it?
I was going to say, don't ask me what sense was enraged, but for some reason he didn't like his golf cart. So he gets to the spot in 20 seconds before we're going up live on the Jumbotron. And they have to, like, you know, because we're not the same size, we're not in the same place. It was the most adrenaline-inducing thing I've done in a long time. But it was amazing, because there it is. A person who's not you, but you're being that person in real time, so much so that people go, hey, Larry, great work.
Well, I'm not strong enough for that kind of stuff. They put me in a virtual operating room when I was in Seattle, and they had an actual patient that was probably the most accurate patient ever made. He was a compendium of information of the thinnest slices of the human body.
Really?
And everything was in there. It's for training surgeons. And there was a big chart on the wall, and I picked up a virtual scalpel, and I killed the guy in about 12 seconds. He was gone.
Virtual surgery?
Yeah, it was scary.
Wow. Is there blood?
There's everything. You're just there.
Because that's what amazed you. Did you ever see the computer reenactment of the O.J. Simpson, of the murders of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman?
No, I better get a TV.
You should get a TV and get a subscription to the New York Times. They were showing off this at the time, new technology. We'll get off technology in a minute, but
let's get on to God.
Yes.
Okay.
But technology exists. But they were showing off this new technology, and they had used all of the information that the prosecution had to devise this animated, computerized reenactment of, and you see this dark, not particularly detailed figure committing this murder. And there's a great deal of, be careful, we want to tell you before we show it to you, this is disturbing, and, you know, disclaimers on the bottom of the screen, and be careful now again after the commercial. We've told you before the commercial, now we're telling you for real, this is, and they run it, and you see these actions, and the victim figures crumple, but the thing they've left out is there's no blood. which of course was the salient feature of the actual crime.
Right.
Pools and pools.
But
of
there's no
blood.
knife either, right?
There's no knife and there's no blood. And what are they warning you about? It's bad mime.
Yeah.
You know. Warning, bad mime.
Right. The blood was in the warning.
That's right. The blood was in the watching.
That's right.
So God, you want to talk about God?
Well, only insofar as he's a character in my book. Because these two women find themselves at the intersection of God and technology, just like we all do. I mean, I don't know about, but we do in New Orleans,
Yeah.
because there's a great deal of religious imagery that young people are using on their bodies. A lot of religious tattoos and religious piercings and so on. And the fact that there are also entities, things like angels, that are very thick there, and creatures described in a lot of religious traditions that show up at the same time that figures from the internet show up. So that it's all mixed up in there, you know. There is no the only problem with God in the book is that Felicity's grandmother has a vision that causes her to abandon the Catholic faith of her ancestors and become a Baptist and follow Jeremy Elvis Mullen, based on our friend Jimmy Swaggart.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a fateful decision that haunts Felicity, who decides to take revenge for that and some other things. And
Do you write fast?
Oh no, 5 years.
This is 5 years.
5 years.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, I write fast, but I write fast, you know,
Over and over again.
stuff. Well, not novels, but
No.
you know, stuff I have to write.
Yeah.
Like my column tomorrow for Architecture magazine is due, and I'm looking for a space to write it on.
You can borrow my laptop if you want.
No, I have
I think we're here to talk about both our books, but I mean, this
Yeah,
is.
I'll
this
talk
is-
about yours.
Okay, but this is. This is a wonderful evocation of millennial craziness, and
Yeah, it's kind of a Rorschach dose that I saw from the reviews is that people read in it various things that they want to read in it. It's a lot like the stain on Monica's dress, you know. It's a national Rorschach test, you know. You can look at it and say, what do you see in it?
the guy who bought O.J.'s Heisman, who had explained that by saying that he was trying to impress his girlfriend, said, well, you know, it's a historical figure. It's like Bill Clinton's dress. So it became Bill Clinton's dress all of a sudden.
Right. That's an auction object.
Yeah, but just by the mere act of staining it, he took possession of it.
That's right.
So stain it and claim it.
Well. Anyway, I just read your book this afternoon, and it's wonderful.
Thank you.
Yeah. Just like Andrea said, I could hear you talking.
Well, it's, to me, the hardest thing to do in writing essays or any of that stuff is to find a voice. Because it's, I was writing when I was, you know, a teenager at my school paper, and I remember like trying on different voices and trying on the style. Since I am a mimic by nature, the hardest thing for me to do is not to mimic somebody, you know.
Sounds just like you.
Well, but I'm a
And
composite.
you're many.
No, but I mean that's. I wrote this column for the LA Times Magazine for a couple of years, and it was where I sort of learned to do that kind of writing. And then Slate, which is this, I don't,
Yeah, I've seen Slate.
have you had any experience writing with them?
No.
It's so great because it's this online magazine that Microsoft runs.
Oh, I did write something for
You do?
Yeah, I did, actually, yeah. I said they were bad.
You said Microsoft is bad.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they let you say that. Huh?
Well, sure, what they care.
Yeah.
It's all content.
Yeah, you're just another content provider. But they're so free of the constraints of most conventional magazines. They didn't care how long I wrote, and I was doing this. I was writing about the O.J. civil trial, and I could file whenever I wanted to and write whatever length I wanted to. So I had to become my own policeman in a lot of ways. And they edited it lightly, but it was the first time that I really had to find that voice that could be consistent through, I mean, it was 2.5 months. And I'm trying to be the person who's sitting next to you, showing you a tape of the trial and nudging you every once in a while and going, look at that guy, look what he did, you know. So that's sort of what gave me the training to do this kind of, because as a mimic, I'll just fall into whoever style I've heard that day, you know. It's very hard to just stay me.
Well, I'm not. I don't think I have a voice at all. I just channel, you know. Do you want to, I was just looking and thinking that these good folks may want to talk to us.
Absolutely.
You know.
Absolutely.
I mean, we could do this for hours, you know.
But we don't have wine in front of us, so we probably... Oh, yes, let's read something from our mutual books.
Okay.
Do you know what to read?
No, but I can open it using the oracular method and answer, you know. Yeah, I do know.
Okay.
Do you have a passage?
I have a...
Go ahead,
yeah.
and then I'll look for mine.
All right. This is just to plump you in the middle of this is a book that sort of meanders around the topic of why, of all people, Bill Clinton, this, whatever else you can say about him, he's a guy who basically takes a poll to find out which side of the mouth to chew gum on, has become the object of such fervent hatred that we're now discussing whether he's a rapist. So, this is sort of in the middle of the search for an answer to the question. The tone of self-righteousness has persisted in Clintonian rhetoric. Here's a recent presidential quote about the discovery that he had intractable opponents. Quote, "You know, sometimes when you try to effect that kind of transformation, you know you're going to provoke a reaction. I didn't dream it would be quite as profound as it has been, the reaction." Transformation. That's what he's been taking us through. To be honest with you, I don't feel that different. And I look, if anything, a little worse than when all this started, but creeping hair loss is, I guess, a kind of transformation. To be fair, Bill Clinton has transformed the national debate. Just as Nixon Press Secretary Ron Ziegler's "contrition is bullshit" quote marked the first time that bovine ordure had been referred to colloquially on the front pages of the nation's newspapers, Clinton has made the media safe for ejaculate and cigars with a certain flavor. Just to see the Washington Press Corps feign prudish disgust over sexual activities far less unusual than those engaged in by, say, the typical British member of Parliament. One such worthy was found dead, hanging by the neck, an orange in his mouth and a plastic bag over his head, has been transforming. These are the same people who regale each other at Georgetown dinner parties with the latest, hottest rumors about the private lives of politicians high and low, but keep predicting a yuck factor among the great unwashed when we learn about the cigar or the macadamia nuts. Actually, the real transformation is being experienced by the Washington Press Corps. Actually, the real transformation being experienced by the Washington Press Corps is the realization that they no longer have these juicy stories all to themselves. We can all regale each other over dinner with this stuff now. The challenge for us is to skip dinner and get straight to the dirt.
Speaking of polls, in this particular chapter 23, this book solidly made in chapters, and each chapter introduced by what's in it, an angel named Zach has been put in charge of the arrival of great minds into the city of New Orleans, minds that arrive and incarnate in quite inappropriate bodies, as it turns out, because it's badly organized, the whole effort. And Zach is in charge of polling them to see whether they want this world to continue or not. And Angel Zach sat on a plume of smoke above Brennan's restaurant and surveyed the great minds he had been given in keeping for the purpose of assessing their opinions of the world. The reflections of the minds were to be taken as yes and no votes for an eventual decision on the disposition of the planet. All this assessing and eventual, snarled Zach. Nothing but bureaucracy and more bureaucracy. Ah, for a taste of old God the Father, swift decision-maker, scourger of world, incinerator of lip-givers, democracy, my putti popo. Einstein flexed his tattooed biceps, zipped up his tight black jeans, and tucked them into scuffed Tony Lamas. He had just finished offering his new body to a customer inside a peep show booth at Adult Videos on Bourbon Street and was $20 richer. He surveyed the tawdry surroundings the ironic heavens had cast him in and concluded humanity's continuing need for psychological degradation is a revolt against the demands of machinery, and it makes art necessary. Therefore, the planet is still a very interesting place, and it ought to be preserved until the last hustler on Bourbon Street and the last showgirl on Place Pigalle die of boredom. Einstein had cast his vote. Keep the shit house. Zach sighed and noted it. So a number of these minds are here. Ovid is here, and Plato is working at the Wax Museum, and Nostradamus is a waiter at the Napoleon House, and Napoleon himself was a black kid tapper on around, and Karl Marx. I'll just do the Karl Marx bit. Karl Marx had volunteered for overtime on Christmas Day to get away from the frighteningly large wife that came with the package he'd been given. His fellow crew members were three mean white men, a group of ruffians who had all recently been paroled from the federal penitentiary at Angola. They seemed determined to not do a lick of work on the busted gas main they had been assigned to, which meant that Marx was doing all the digging by himself while they drank beer and made fun of his clumsiness. The working class had surely degenerated since 1856. The mere existence of such menial work in the late days of post-capitalism meant that something had gone woefully wrong in the logic of history. Marx wished that he was in a pub in London discussing the matter with Engels. He would have liked, in fact, to be anywhere but in this city, grunting behind a shovel while scooping large portions of black mud in a ditch. Engels might have provided an insight to the paradox of a seemingly boundless affluence brought about by labor-saving gadgets that did not, however, lessen exploitation in any way. He had not given sufficient thought to the problem of time in Das Kapital. The alienation he had predicted had occurred, but humanity's revolutionary impulses had been dulled along the way by unpredictable factors. A vast extortion of time was taking place in post-industrial society, a type of metaphysical exploitation that surpassed his wildest imaginings. Not that he needed to worry about post-anything in his current position, covered with sweat, racially demeaned, physically tormented, and intellectually isolated. Was there truly a progression toward a better future, or had he, as his enemies implied, been misled by the stubborn utopian messianism of his Jewish genes? Marx wished he knew. Undecided, recorded Zach. So, this poll goes on, and quite a few of them end up, taking an active part in what happens, including my very favorite of these minds, Nikola Tesla, the great inventor and eccentric who decides that he is going to create a revolutionary machine to clean up the Mississippi River, and he's going to use one of my characters, Felicity, as a circuit breaker.
That's brilliant. Do you spend a lot of time in Jerusalem?
Yeah, well, enough to write all this, but yeah, I was there for some time.
Because you write so feelingly and knowingly of New Orleans and equally so of Jerusalem, but...
Yeah, well, they're very opposite cities. Jerusalem is all stones and hard stones of the spirit, New Orleans is the sort of slow-flowing mud of the soul. But, yeah, I mean, I had a small case of Jerusalem syndrome when I went there.
Really?
As soon as you land in that city, something happens. It's so invested with feeling by so many people for so long that it's a form of electricity. It's just
you can't be a skeptic in Jerusalem easily?
Well, no, I mean it's just something physical. And I think people who actually get Jerusalem syndrome, who come from the Midwest, they're accountants or something, preparing for KY2 or 1000 or whatever the thing is called.
The KY2 problem is being dealt with in West Hollywood as we speak, but...
Right. They go over there and they leave their stuff in the hotel room and they go into the streets and they get possessed and they think that they're Jesus or Mary and they take them, or Joshua or David, they take them to Kfar Shaul Hospital and the psychiatric wing, which at all times has at least 50 GZI in it, and they cure them, they fix them. In about 2 weeks, they're embarrassed. They don't know what happened to them. And, but there is, you know, I mean, then they get their stuff and they come back, and that's that, you know.
It's got to be perhaps the most frightening place to imagine being on the dawn.
I'm going.
Are you going?
I'm going. I'm going to be there.
Seriously?
Seriously.
Buy insurance.
Well, if anybody will sell it.
Yeah, right.
No.
Are you really going there?
Yeah, I'm actually talking, there is no, I mentioned patrol because I know a doctor there who's been working on these cases. And I want to do a play from this book called The Radio Messiah, and I want to talk directly to the audience of the inmates. There'll probably be 500 of them in there. It'll be like Murad Saad, but no actors.
Oh, God.
And I want to talk to them. It's called, the piece is called Radio Messiah, and I want to just engage them between 10 p.m. and midnight. And, you know, see what happens.
Whoa.
Should be great.
Oh, man.
I don't know, I'm jaded. I need strong feeling.
You really do. You need major input.
Major input. I'm sure the Israeli police will take care of things. There would be every nut in the universe that are dragging a lit fuse behind them.
Yeah. Well, they've already put out they've already kicked a couple cults out.
That's right.
Just on general principles.
Yeah. Didn't like the way they were trying to kill themselves. I'll go there, I'll use the line from my friend Bill Knott, who said, people who get down on their knees to me are the answers to my prayers.
So we should open this up, you think?
Yes.
Yeah. But before we do, we were talking about this while they were connecting our mics up and everything. I just want to take the opportunity to say a person who wrote an absolutely, I mean, he's written amazing stuff for his whole life, but an absolutely seminal piece of satire that we both read at a disgustingly impressionable age is here with us tonight, and he's one of our treasures in this town and this country, Mr. Paul Krassner, editor of The Realist. And when the camera's off, we'll tell you what the piece was about.
I remember every word.
Yeah, I remember the images more than the words. So, you now, yes.
Use this microphone here. And I welcome anybody to come up and ask questions.
I want to address this to Andre. Andre, I met you 25 years ago. You were a surrealist then, I remember. And anyway, I didn't know what that meant then, and I'm really not clear about it now either. But one thing that intrigues me about what you're doing is that it seems to me that through access through cyberspace, if you want to call it that, where you have this amazing conjunction of all of these historical figures and events and realities, you know, mingling together, it's almost as if it gives access to the psyche for, you know, enormous chunks of time and experience without all of the dilutions of linear time and translation. It's very immediate. And I guess the question I want to ask is, what sense do you have of where that's going? I hear some people think it's almost like a Millenistic equation of insanity, and others think it's sort of a great psychic vacuum cleaning process which will speed up some of our bad habits and get us somewhere else. Anyway, I don't really know. I just wonder what your sense of that is.
Well, those are all good ideas. I find, you know, specifically the millennial craziness quite amusing and with great comic possibilities when you see five members of a family in the Midwest with shotguns defending a large stash of ramen noodles and Campbell's asparagus, cream of asparagus, and you think, oh yeah, I'm going to go and get that stuff and right now get my brains blown all over the cornfield, you know. So it's terrific, you know. That's the narrow sense of it, of course, you know. The other is that, you know, I don't think there was ever any need for surrealism, you know, in this century because There is no need for any kind of aesthetic of weirdness because everything is bizarre enough, you know, so that every, events that we've lived through, and not even just the public ones, but almost every event that has taken place in the short time I've been conscious, which is about 3 hours, has so much potential contradiction and paradox and mystery and weirdness in it that most anyone that would pay that much attention to it would probably self-destruct. So we have kind of filters built in to not take in too much. But it's clear now that the definition of what a human being is changing because we're shifting. We can shift identities in cyberspace. We can go to Mardi Gras and shift them for real in a meat space masquerade, which is the old time-honored thing to be someone else at Carnival. Simply what we are for is kind of under question a lot. So, and what the difference is between entertainment and news and, all of these questions outstrip the wildest dreams of surrealism as an aesthetic, you can't, if you brought André Breton back and you sat him before a television and you made him watch about 6 commercials, the poor guy would just throw his hands out in the air and say, it's here, I have nothing else to say,
We should have some traveling music for this. Yes, applause for the questioners.
My question is, what's it like to go back to Romania and look?
I've never been in
into
Romania.
that?
Close your eyes.
I guess it must be for the other guy. I think it's the other guy.
Close your eyes and come with me.
Since so much of what you do is to kind of look at this society through a foreign or a different perspective, what's it like to go back to Romania and look at it now that you've been in the United
Well, it's
Kingdom?
always a thrill. The first time I went back in 1989, I started smoking again because there were so many nervous soldiers who hadn't slept in days with their finger on the triggers of their AK-47s, and it seemed like a nice thing to offer them a cigarette and smoke one with them. So that part of the return was good, and then all of the nostalgias I ever had about being born there and growing up were I went back and felt them very intensely because I went back to smell things. You go back to your childhood or whatever and just open those Proustian cookies and there you are, with strudel from your neighbors who've all emigrated, but the strudel smell remains. All of that was there. Of course, I was there with NPR, and I was doing some reports for ABC News, too, and they didn't pay me to smell things, so I had to file some quote-unquote real reports, reportage, but basically I was just keeping my nose to the people, the windows in the old buildings, and that was great. And then I met friends of my childhood and people I went to high school with, and they were there having grown into grotesque adults. And so the reality started to come in, and now I've been back about every year almost, and each year I go back, the place becomes more mysterious. It was very understandable when they were shooting at each other in 1989, that I understood. Now that they are not like that, I understand nothing, so that's what it's like. It's the area of misunderstanding grows.
This may sound like a silly question, but I don't really get the millennium buzz at all. I sort of look at it like I have Macintosh, so I'm ready. But so what, so I don't understand people. I have a girlfriend who says she wants to get married before the year 2000 because things are going to happen. So
It's
I don't
the eye
really,
of the storm.
Yeah, I don't get it, and I'm kind of curious about what your impressions are about this millennium buzz, because I'm kind of clueless at this point.
Well, when I was growing up, I used to read about the end of the last century and the craziness that just occurs at turns of the century. And I'd never really read a lot about what happened at the turn of the last millennium. But
there are a lot of false messiahs. Sabbatai Zevi was, got the rabble quite stirred up about waiting for the end of the world. But I lived through about 7 ends of the world in my time, because they all used to always announce it in San Francisco, and we'd go to Golden Gate Park to wait for it, because the planets are lined up or something. And you take some acid and talk to everybody about everything, and then the end of the world didn't come, and everybody was embarrassed, and you go home and, you know, what the hell did I tell everybody? Why did I take my clothes off again?
And where the hell are they? This is slightly off this goes back to your previous answer. A friend of mine told me last week that he showed his 11-year-old daughter Dr. Strangelove. They watched it together, and she liked it a lot, but she said that never really happened. And the idea that you can be in a country where people are buying guns and powdered food now, doing basically the bomb shelter bit
Right.
all over again with just another pretext.
Some people don't have to, because they already have the stuff in there.
They've saved it from, it's not, I don't think it stays good that long, but
I thought cans, really?
no.
We're told in Romania cans are good forever.
Well, in Romania they are. As Bill Clinton might have said, it depends what your definition of good is.
Right.
But we have this weakness for creating things and then imputing meaning to the things that we've created. And we've created this numbering system for counting the sun going around, and then we've imputed incredible amounts of significance to it as if it came from somewhere else rather than from inside us.
But then, of course, it doesn't matter, because once we invested with so much significance, something is bound to happen.
Well, yes, just by sheer human craziness.
Right.
I would be amazed. I'm just interested to know where people other than you would be spending New Year's Eve, because to me I would be home, close to the television, but away from the door.
But I think it'd be a good occasion for people to just go outside and play soccer with their kids and meet the neighbors, you know. I mean, the electricity goes off in Romania and Cuba every 4 hours, and
So what's the difference?
everything is great, and
Yeah.
you go out and do stuff, you know.
But I don't mean in terms of the electricity going out. I just mean in terms of that concentration of human craziness. I mean, New Year's Eve to me is a depressing holiday anyway, because we have to have a good time. And the once in 1,000 years pressure to have something really, that's more than people can take, you know?
You just have to cook that one thing you only cook every 1,000
That's
years.
right. 1,000-year stew. Oh, this takes a lot of stirring. Yes. Oh.
Thank you. At the end of the millennium here, we've had this strange confluence of events with OJ and President Clinton and Y2K. Is this cosmic? Is this connected? And
There have actually been more events than those.
oh,
but-
I know. As far as like for comedy material, what's next? What could be this rich in terms of material as global as this?
After OJ, people were saying nothing can be like this, and we were either surprised or appalled to find out we were wrong.
I think it's the Al Gore tapes. I don't know if I should reveal this so publicly.
I'm not sure. You should turn the camera off now.
Yeah. I suspect he's into S&M.
Al Gore. So the stiffness is induced.
I won't go into details, but I'll tell you later.
Okay. I look forward to that. First of all, as one could have seen if you'd watched Matt Drudge's show the night after Clinton was acquitted, and he had Larry Nichols, one of the two Clinton-hating Larrys I talk about in the book, on the show, who said,
Matt, this isn't going away. We're just starting. This is just the beginning. This is just the beginning.
so this isn't over, clearly. I mean, if you saw that interview last night, you know that this is just chapters 2.5 or 3,000, whatever it is. But no, I mean, what I like about making fun of this stuff is that I don't have to imagine what's next. I leave it to people with an imagination like Andre. I like working in a medium or in a field where the characters are given to me, situations are given to me. All I have to write is dialogue. And, you know,
Yeah, I'm not voting for Gore for another reason, because he has electric cars that run down smokers. It's part of the plan.
I just think that if the Democrats come to a point where it's the Gore-Bradley debate, buy Starbucks stock.
You know, the Starbucks and both Microsoft and Starbucks both started in Seattle for a good reason, because there are now, all of America used to go to sleep at 10. Now there are Starbucks in every little town in America, and everybody gets totally wired on coffee. They stay up all night
And to work their
on the
computers.
internet.
That's an interesting theory.
That's not paranoia.
More, come, talk, be, do, say. No? Come on. Oh, here we go. Yes.
I have spent a considerable amount of my life in New Orleans, and I understand its profound effects on the individual. And I was wondering if you could explain how you came to New Orleans and what it has done to affect you and your way of thinking.
Well, to answer, to begin at the end of with your question, I've acquired the New Orleans accent. And everything else about how well, the hours I keep are influenced by New Orleans. As William Carlos Williams said, somewhere, the beauties of travel are due to the strange hours we keep to see them. And New Orleans has definitely changed my hours. You know, I find the hour of 4 a.m. incredibly normal, even though I have to get up and do stuff. And I got there because, you know, it's a great left field magic. I went to apply for a job at LSU in Baton Rouge. They said, sure, you can teach here, but I couldn't live in Baton Rouge. That was a terrible experience because it's just a school surrounded by chemical factories and shopping malls. So I moved into New Orleans, and I commute there by Greyhound, where my people are. Greyhound is one of the last great American communities that will never be seen on television, because there's no advertising for them. They don't have any money.
Well, there was from time to time, but it didn't resemble the actual experience. Oddly enough for advertising, but no, go ahead.
Yeah, well, no, I mean, I just, so I mean, you can't, and then once you live in New Orleans, you can't get out again. I'm surprised you did. That's pretty great, actually, because the gravity of the river just tends to slow down, so you can't go against gravity, and I'm not intending to. And it's a city that just feeds you stories. It's wonderful. Harry's there, seems like every other week.
Yeah, yeah. I had heard about it for years, and it was one of those things like, well, you have to go to Bali, you have to go to Rio, you have to go to New Orleans. Yeah, I'll do it. And I was working on a movie in Seattle whose name was changed before it came out, and I can't remember either of the titles, so that's no clue. But friends at HBO, yes, at one time I had friends at HBO, said, we've got tickets for Jazz Fest. Why don't you come down to New Orleans for it? I didn't know that tickets for Jazz Fest was no big deal. Anybody can get tickets for Jazz Fest. Flying to New Orleans is the big deal, especially from Seattle, which is overnight through Dallas. I mean, I finished working at 8 o'clock. I had to take a plane that had me sitting around the Dallas airport for 4 hours going, where, they used to have postcards of the assassination. Where are those? Got to New Orleans, went to Jazz Fest. They had tickets to Jazz Fest. Went to Jazz Fest, had a breakfast at Brennan's, which every tourist has to do once and once only, and spent a total of a day and a half there, and that was it. It was just like, you know, the dealer who gives you the first joint or the first fix for free. I went back 2 more times that year, once to the Republican convention in mid-August. Yeah. Now, I mean, if you can like a city in the depths of the hottest and most humid summer with a convention full of Republicans walking around, then that's really love. Fortunately, my wife, Judith Owen, who is here tonight, fell in love with the city when I took her down. So we then both loved it. And one of the things that I think through Judith's eyes was able to love about it is it's a piano town in a guitar world. And so that's reason enough.
It's great walking with Harry in New Orleans, because there would be these people saying, "Hi, Harry," and there'd be these sort of large slabs of T-shirts that are too small for them that say Jazz Fest 1978, and they say, "Who's that?" And Harry says, "Well, actually, that's sort of the chief executive at Warner Brothers." And so I guess there's a secret cult of New Orleans.
Also, you know, I have to say, and this is pathetic, but this is an evening to be pathetic, I guess. I'm from here, and I don't know how many of you from Los Angeles, but and I love God bless you. And I love Los Angeles, and I'll never leave totally. But one thing I've always felt about living here is you get no hometown thing. You get no, "We love you because you're ours," and you get that in New Orleans the second time you go into a restaurant. "Hey, darling, how you been?" And there was actually, somebody called me and said the Times-Picayune had a story. First of all, how can you not love a town whose newspaper is called the Times-Picayune? It had a story, and I don't repeat this for any reason except to emphasize how crazy it is. New Orleans has spawned a great deal of comedic talent. Harry Shearer, John LaRoquette, and Ellen DeGeneres. Now, John and Ellen were born there. I've been coming and visiting there for about 4 years and finally bought a place there. But they'd claimed me now.
Right. And you have your own waiter, right? It's Galator.
That's right, yes. It's got a history of 300 years of embracing all who come by it, and it's enormously productive.
Right. And embracing.
Yeah. And redundant. More people now. Come on. Come on. Get up. Or yell from your seat. How about that? Is that easier? No. Here we go. Todd Everett, ladies and gentlemen.
Stupid, but just to keep the thing going, as a Romanian in New Orleans, you socialize a lot with Anne Rice. Are you a technical advisor?
Anne Rice makes a cameo appearance in Messiah, in my new book. Her name is Angelique Risotto. And she's very large, and she has very skinny, pale followers, which she has eaten half of them. That's why she's... And I don't socialize with Anne, no. I would like to give her a couple of writing lessons. She's also populated a town with a very unsavory type of affluent vampire. I'm not sure about it. I mean, vampires should be affluent because they've lived a long time, and if they can't amass a fortune in a couple of thousand years, you know, it must be pretty lame. But I don't know. I'm not. She's also buying all the real estate up on St. Charles Avenue there, and I wrote a novel called The Blood Countess in an attempt to kind of chip away at her monolith, but wasn't good enough. So I can't really put a wedge between her encroaching purchases.
She has stood as the savior of New Orleans aesthetic against the encroachment of Al Copeland.
Of Al Copeland, who's a lot more New Orleans, actually.
Yeah.
They came, she protested the building that Al Copeland put up a restaurant called Straya, which everybody accused of looking just like something in Los Angeles. And she took out a full-page ad, and she complained about it. And then Al Copeland responded quite nicely. And the entire town got into it. Everybody was talking about it, and the newspaper ran a front-page poll in which 75% of the people were with Al. And then what happened exactly? I forget. This went on, and there were proposals for wrestling, mud wrestling between Anne Rice and Al Copeland, the Chicken King. So it was the Queen of Vampire Kitchen, the King of Chicken Kitch.
It was. It had for those of you who can't quite identify with Anne Rice and Al Copeland, it had the ability to dominate the town and form very furious sides. The same sort of feeling that Sidney Blumenthal versus Christopher Hitchens has had in Washington. You know, nobody can not take sides there because you're either going to go to one dinner party or another. You know?
What's with Christopher Hitchens? What's happened?
All I can say about Christopher Hitchens is this. Do you know him at all?
Yeah. I drank a lot of vodka with him one.
Well, I've met him a few times, and last May he came to visit The Simpsons, a recording session, which you're all invited to do. And it happens at 10 o'clock in the morning at 20th Century Fox, or 20 o'clock in the morning at 10th Century Fox. But anyway, 10 o'clock in the morning, and he's there with his 5-year-old son. Yeah. And he's clean and neat and pressed and combed and groomed and shaved and looks like a regular human being, you know, that would be applying for a driver's license at the DMV. And by 5 o'clock in the afternoon, when he has to be on television, he's got an 8 o'clock shadow, and he looks like he's slept at the Salvation Army for 2.5 days and looks rumpled beyond, you know, belief. And it just said to me, oh my God, even this guy's got an act. You know, and it's...
Well, why did he swear to that affidavit, you know, by Sidney Blumenthal? Because I thought he was some kind of lefty.
Yeah, he's a weird kind of lefty, though. He's a lefty who despises Clinton.
Well, that's true.
And he despises all who...
Your book, right?
Yeah, it's my book. And he despises Sidney Blumenthal for being a handmaiden of Clinton.
Right.
And has taken the most bizarre position, which is, I'll swear out this affidavit,
Right.
but I won't testify in a trial, which of course will never happen anyway. But in Washington, D.C., until at least the Juanita Broderick story came out, nothing dominated people's conversations like, are you on Sidney's side or are you on Chris Hitchens' side? Because nothing determines their lives so much as which dinner parties can you go to, and the lines were being drawn. You could now not be seen with both of them. There was just one side or the other. It's like Hollywood, but more so.
Yes. The depressing glass ball. All my friends in the media, you call them in the morning, they're depressed. During this thing at night, they're despondent. You know, they travel.
During this thing?
Yeah.
And I was having a great time.
Stuff from here.
Yeah. No, what's wrong? Hi.
This is kind of a change of topic, but since we're in a holy place, I was wondering if you could have a conversation with God, what would you ask, or what would you want to say to him or her, or what would you want to know for yourself?
Well, I have conversations with God all the time. I mean, you know, practically every day. And the reason for that is that I speak all these languages I've forgotten. And all that remains in some of them is this kind of weird conversation that occasionally pops up. For instance, Romanian has become a kind of sacred language in the middle of this vast array of prosaic English that I conduct my existence in. And now and then I hear something in me speaking Romanian to something. And I imagine these autonomous complexes are having God's type conversations. But what they say, I don't know exactly.
Your Romanian isn't that good anymore.
That's right. The translator is a little faulty, is what it says. So I didn't, you know, the hypothetical doesn't, I mean, I don't even know about God or any of that. My parents were communists. And I only became interested in churches in the summer because it was sort of all of this stuff was sort of slowly revealed to me, but what it had to do with religion or God, I never figured out, except that there is something out there that wants to keep talking to something that, you know, answers in another language. Does that make sense? Probably not.
Yeah. Apropos of issues that divide towns, like Al Copeland versus Anne Rice, or Sidney Blumenthal versus Christopher Hitchens. We have, somebody asked me the other day, why this such a big deal about Elia Kazan getting an Oscar? And all the writers who are, you know, the blacklisted writers who were leading the protest. And I said, well, you know, it did really impact their lives in a big way, and they either had to choose between their livelihood or their residence, because they could either continue to write but not live in America, or continue to live in America but start sweeping floors for a living. He said, yeah, but it's just an Oscar. It's an interesting outside perspective, isn't it?
I have a question. And this is apropos of people that divide
You don't get
cities.
applauded because you run this thing.
No,
so
I don't even. Why Tom Brokaw? Why?
You have to ask NBC that question. Why do I pick on Tom Brokaw?
Yeah, I mean, don't the other guys give you enough?
Yeah. I will now explain Andrea's fairly subtle reference in her introduction to me. NBC discovered, after they aired the 60s, this miniseries called The 60s a couple weeks ago, that they had a whole new revenue stream because they could, a phrase which I love for its picturesque possibilities, thank you. They sold CDs of the soundtrack, and they sold, because they did incessant promotion of the CDs, they sold 60,000 within 2 hours after the show went off the air, and they realized, oh my God, we can stay alive. So they announced that they were now actively developing shows and miniseries and movies with the idea of this ancillary revenue stream as a primary goal. And so I just took that premise and thought, well, here's an album of songs by Tom Brokaw that he didn't get to sing on Nightly News, called Songs in the Key of L. Layla, Lola, isn't she lovely? And la 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 means I love you. Andrew, all I can say, aside from the laughter, which is sweeping the synagogue, is that the man gets $7 million a year, and his job is to pronounce 26 letters of the alphabet, and he misses by 1. And last I saw, NBC wasn't asking for their Ellsworth back, so.
Well, this, I guess, is, you know, the flip side of the God question, so I have to ask, you know.
Do I talk to the devil?
The Jerry Falwell question.
Oh.
First of all, are you the Antichrist? And secondly, what do you think about the whole Teletubby thing?
Everybody know that Jerry Falwell announced, I mean, he's 2 for 2. He announced during January that the Antichrist was alive and was a male Jew. Right. And then, after apologizing for that, he announced that Tinky Winky, the purple Teletubby with the triangle on his head and the purse, who sometimes wears a tutu, was a gay role model and unfit for kids.
Right. Well, no, I'm the Antichrist because my initials are AC.
Ooh. But wouldn't the Antichrist be cleverer than that?
Why?
Hide in plain sight, huh?
The cleverness is part of the job description.
Actually, I started, because I was on the radio in New York having to talk about Tinky Winky and Jerry Falwell for an hour, because I was supposed to be a guest of Bob Grant, this right-wing maniac ranter, right. And he was sick with the flu, so they said, "Oh, well, you'll just host his show then." So now I'm thrown in with these people, and they were actually okay, but you know, it's talk radio, so let's talk about Jerry Falwell and Tinky Winky, and a guy actually called up from a car phone. Yeah, Jim from Florida. I saw this show. You don't understand what you're dealing with here. I saw this show where one of his friends He was bent over, who was Tinky Winky, yes, and this friend was poking him right up the rectum. Now, I don't know if you've seen these characters, but I pointed out to the caller that in all likelihood, based on my experience, Tinky Winky didn't have a rectum. Because they're anatomically vague. But I do have, because I had to talk about this for an hour, I was coming down from it talking with a friend, I actually started having to think about Teletubbies. And I do think there's something wrong with it. And it has nothing to do with, Tinky Winky being gay. But have you seen it?
No. Somebody said they went to Walmart and pushed one in the belly button and it said, faggot, faggot.
I couldn't verify that, but if you watch it, it's weird. It's made for kids 1 to 3 years old, and basically it's showing them characters that are acting like them. And it occurred to me as I was talking to a friend, this is different. This is the history of the race is basically that the young ones are sort of induced to model themselves on people older than them. And all of a sudden we're saying, no, model yourself on yourself,
yeah.
Which we've been doing with American teenagers for 40 years to our great credit. And now it's happening at this remarkably young age.
I think children that age don't even recognize themselves in the mirror.
Oh, by one,
it takes them
they...
about 2, actually,
Really?
before they look there and say, or well, let's have videotape. They look at videotape. They don't know it's them.
Well, adults listen to themselves on audio tape and say, oh, I don't sound like that.
So I'm not sure what that is, but, I mean...
But still, you're supposed to be learning...
They talk baby talk, right?
They talk baby talk, and they act like babies. And it just strikes me as this culture is more and more saying, no, don't try to be grown up. Don't model yourself on people older than you. Stay at that age. Stay at that lovely...
marketing niche, it's lowering the age for
consumables,
right.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Hi.
I was curious what your views are on how show business values and advertising values have sort of become inseparable from news coverage, and how some of the stories you've alluded to and spoken about tonight, like the O.J. trial and the impeachment and all the details of the Starr report, have their own graphics packages and music packages, and even they recently held a press conference to celebrate that Monica Lewinsky's interview with Barbara Walters would be held during sweeps.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You must have read my book. I talk about that to a great extent. Well, there's nothing to a great extent. I mean, look, but to as great an extent as possible. I do think that politics and show business have suffered greatly from using the tools of advertising, and specifically the tools of market research and polling and focus grouping. Those are tools that were developed by advertisers whose basic job is to overcome sales resistance. We don't want to hear those messages. We're, as a cultural proposition, if a salesman comes to the door, we'd like to slam it. So salesmen try to overcome that, and these are tools that they've generated to help them. Now, supposedly, civic leadership, civic governance, and entertainment contain messages that culturally we've always wanted to hear or thought we should hear. And now, all of a sudden, those same devices are being used to hone those messages. And what we've reaped as a result is unwatchably similar television shows and elections where the turnout goes down every year. So something must be working. I also think that the main show business value that's invaded the journalism profession is desperation. Anybody who's gone to the Comedy Store at 1 o'clock in the morning knows that underlaying all the affability and charm that may attach to people in show business, at bottom there's endless desperation. And when you watched MSNBC trying to grab onto JonBenet Ramsey for all their life after Clinton was acquitted, you saw that kind of show business desperation attaching to so-called journalism. We got to have a hit. We need a new hit. What is it going to be? It's John Bonet or it's Juanita Brock. But that runs the business these days. That runs the celebrification business, which is the business that anybody who's in the public eye is in. I had an interesting experience with that on the subject of O.J. In the last phase of the O.J. civil trial, they were arguing about how much after they'd already found him liable for the crime that he may have committed, they were arguing about what the Goldmans and the Browns should get as a penalty. And the O.J. defenders were saying, well, his name is worth nothing now. You've just found him, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, liable for these murders. His name is valueless. And I found that an absolutely, you had to not be living in America to believe that proposition. This is a country where John Wayne Gacy's clown paintings have a thriving market. And I wrote a piece about that in the Los Angeles Times and said, you know, if there was a little time when O.J. couldn't enjoy that level of popularity or marketability in this country, he could always go to Asia, maybe do a tour with Michael Jackson, because that's an area of the world that doesn't hold Jackson's taste in young children against him, possibly because of the role young children play in the commerce of most of those cities. That sentence was edited out by the Los Angeles Times, and the editor explained to me that she was afraid readers, although she didn't argue with the factual basis of it, she was afraid that readers might interpret it as racist. Racist against whom? You know, but...
Andre, how did you come to go to school at Iowa? And Harry, did you know that Tom Brokaw flunked out of Iowa?
Well, this is why you can pronounce your L's.
Did you ask me if I went to school in Iowa? Is that what you said?
Yeah.
I've never been to school in Iowa. I've never been to school. I've never been to school in Iowa.
At the workshop?
No. No, I went to Iowa in 1972 to visit a couple of my Bohemian friends. And I spent a very long night writing collaborations, Exquisite Corpses, with them. And I've never been there since. Well, no, I went there when the Starbucks came in, actually. But, no, I haven't. In fact, I never let much school get in the way of my education. To quote somebody. Well, you know, I don't know about you, but I mean, I'm just a little tired enough. Before going to sign books, I would love to do that, but...
if there's anything that you got to ask,
there is another...
do it now.
Yes, do it. The Exquisite Corpse doesn't exist on paper anymore. It's now on the internet. It's corpse.org. W-O-R-G.
And you don't have...
I mean, O-R-G.
And you don't have to subscribe, right? You
don't. It's free.
It's free.
Yeah. You don't have one of those machines?
Corpse.org.
Right.
And Andre sign books in the lobby, and we'll see you out there. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Take your microphone off.
Oh, yeah.
What's to say? Well, I have this to say, that if there's a master race, and I'm certainly not convinced that there is one.
Yeah.
These guys can't ride it, you know?
Well, that's clear. I was talking to my wife about it coming over here, and I still think that when American blacks and American Jews diverged in '67 or '68, it was a really tragic moment.
A good day for a fifth column.
It was a good day for the Nazis.
Yeah.
It was you know, amazing to live through it and watch the suburban Jews in New York just become knee-jerk in their response to. Because I'd worked in Compton, and I knew that a lot of what was going on was basically, you know, nobody stood up and said, well, you're paying more for groceries because we're paying more for insurance. Nobody ever said that, you know?
But the connectedness of all things is not well understood.
Not at all. So, it just, anyway, so... Michael.
You've corresponded with my friend Phil as well on the net, a little bit here and there. pointed out a couple of broken links to you. And the monkeys woke up and fixed it.
Ah, excellent. All right. Well,
Phil and I were laid off from our company on the same day.
what company?
Quarterdeck software.
Oh, sure. Well, they were all over Santa Monica for a while.
That's right, yeah. At Pico and Main.
Yeah, and now they're not. So are you a geek? Are you a certified geek?
Yes, we are both geeks.
Yeah. And what do you do now?
Phil turned me on the show. I'm a freelance geek now.
Freelance geek,
Not
a floating geek.
a floating geek.
Yeah.
But it's a pleasure to meet you.
Thank you.
Famous Spinal Tap. Yeah, they just keep coming. Thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thanks. Hi. Just sign it?
My grandmother was from Maine.
Okay.
My grandmother was from Maine.
There you go. Thank you. Thank you.
My name is Mark Engel.
Hi, Mark. Nice to meet you.
I am a writer of satire and parody, and I just had the fortune of discovering you. I really appreciate your coming out to speak.
Oh, thanks.
And I wanted to know if there might be would there be a possibility to sit in on the recording of one of your shows, or is that hard to do? And I realize I'm being putting you on the spot.
No, you're not putting me on the spot. It's just I record them in a studio in my house. I do it at odd hours. It's never the same because it fits into the rest of my schedule. It's a tiny little room. It's a million reasons why it's not a practical idea. You can come down to KCRW, but that shows you nothing because that's just me sitting there, talking into a microphone, which you see.
Are you there doing that?
Normally, I won't be there this weekend because of the fund drive, but that's not the interesting part, and the interesting part you can't see.
Sure, I understand. Is there any other way that I would love to, I'm imposing your time to possibly work with you at some point about what you do and how you do it? I've also started getting into voiceovers.
Well, let me give you my email address, and you can...
I sent you a couple parody songs too, but from the beginning last year, when Scandal first broke, I sent you Scandal in the Wind and...
See, I can't...
not to play those.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't listen to that because people, if it doesn't go through agents, if you listen to people's stuff and then they say, oh, there's, yeah.
I'm a lawyer too, so I understand.
Yeah, well, okay. So that's what, lemail@interworld.net. Yeah, and I answer my own emails.
I appreciate that.
What's your name?
Mark.
Mark. What are you writing? Oh, God, look at that. You're writing real stuff.
Romanian.
Oh, gee.
You know how Alan Ginsberg always made these elaborate drawings of little fishes and things, It took him a long time to do it because sightings go to 1, 2,
Jesus.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's
my pleasure.
Hi. Hello there, thank you. I appreciated the hometown theme. John Wayne Gacy, I'm from Chicago,
Oh.
a lot of connections.
I have a lot of friends in Chicago and spent some time there. It
has its own underworld, like a...
Does it?
somewhat of a New Orleans in its own way.
Well, certainly in terms of its corruption, yeah. It's
Second generation corruption now, daily.
Oh yeah, I know. It's hereditary corruption. Thanks. Hi.
Hi. Have you ever read or heard of Miles Nagopoulin?
No.
Irish columnist for the Irish Times from about 40 years ago.
No, I read the Irish Times occasionally now on the internet, but
if you want, if I find it, if I find your fax number, I'll send you a chapter of it.
Oh,
He
okay.
has a whole series of columns on the book handling service he offers for illiterates to make it look like they.
Oh, really?
You get the inscription from Conrad explain, you couldn't have written it. etc.
Really? Oh, I'd love to see that.
But
I'll write you my fax number.
okay. Long time listener.
Thank you. Is this readable? Yeah. It's readable.
Great.
Okay.
Henry.
Henry.
Thank you. Hello.
Do you remember a doctor in New Orleans, David Holtzman, David and Jane Holtzman? They're good friends, and they have told me about But they're in Boston.
Pleasure.
Yeah.
I met them when I first lived there.
Hi.
I'm gonna make you work a little.
Okay.
For my girlfriend.
Are they doing all right?
It's Trina,
Oh,
but she
great.
spells it like that.
Yeah.
Trina Mitchum.
Oh, yeah, Jenny.
Any relation?
Yeah, he was her dad.
Huh?
That was, yeah.
He's gonna have a show in March,
He was
I
her
think.
dad.
Really? Yeah.
That's her birthday next week.
Wow.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Hello.
This is to Mary.
I've just lived here for a year with her, but she's been a big fan of yours forever.
Oh.
They're not over, and I just sit in the car.
That's so nice of you. Why don't I do all that at home? Especially not that every day.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Nice to meet you.
You too. Take care. Hi.
Gary, how are you?
All right, how are you?
This is my friend Dave Berry, who's national presidential campaign running.
Are you really?
If you would just wish him well on this campaign circuit or something.
Absolutely.
I love being with her, but whatever. Even in public. Thanks so much.
Hey,
Hi.
got both notebooks.
All right.
Can you
Man of
just...
substance.
I try. Even though I work in television, I try.
This one.
Just sign and date it, that's fine. Thanks. And this one's to me, and I'm Ted.
Ted.
Hopefully you'll help me out with that.
See, I'm not a U.S. citizen yet, so this is the only way I can.
I can't wait to read this.
Meddling with the federal election.
Are you a illegal alien?
I'm very legal. I'm
Okay.
waiting to be
It's half
sworn
as
in by
good
the
as your
Supreme
trip
Court
across
justice.
America.
Ooh, wow.
It'll be well worth the money.
Well, yeah, that trip took a lot longer than this.
Yeah, did you videotape this one?
No, just took
No.
photographs.
Well, I look forward to it. Thank you.
Elena Secoda. Elena. She social media staff on the day.
Thanks a lot. My pleasure. Hi. Lynn, L-Y-N-N?
And I'm Ellen, so
Somebody,
we're close.
somebody had to speak.
No, check
L-Y-N-N?
Yeah. Check the name tag. Very sure. Am fost la Sibiu și mi s-a părut foarte deosebit de frumos.
Thank you.
Just write your name.
Okay. That I can do.
My dog, Rochester.